Good morning, Your Royal Highness, Lords, ladies and gentlemen. It's my honour to be here today to talk to you about insect protein and how it might impact the broiler industry in the future, and to establish, most importantly, does the idea have legs? So, who am I and why insects? Well, as Jenna just said, I'm a third-generation Yorkshire poultry farmer. We have 6 broiler units across the business, totaling 750,000 birds. And we have a feed mill producing 21,000 tonnes of feed per year for our own farms. So, why insects? It came across in my quest for carbon-neutral chicken. When I first came back to the farm in 2017, I thought, we've got biomass, we've got solar, how hard can it be to get towards carbon neutrality? It turns out quite hard when you use 90 tonnes of imported South America soya in your feed mill each week. So I had to shelve that idea and kept my eyes and ears open for other options that could help us get there. And then I heard about insects. So insects are basically amazing. They will convert anything into protein: food waste, manures, animal byproducts, and even in the case of a company I visited in Kenya, human sewage. It might not be pretty, but it does work. And you get 3 outputs from that. You get insect protein meal, frass, which is effectively the insect manure, which is a very good fertilizer, and then oil, which can be used in biodiesel, cosmetics, or in the animal feed industry. So I decided to see, basically the whole thing seemed too good for me not to work, so I wanted to find out more, and with that in mind, I applied for my Nuffield scholarship. So during my scholarship, I traveled to the UK, Finland, the Netherlands, Kenya, and South Africa. I wanted to view different production systems, both large and small, on-farm and more commercial operations that are standalone, to understand what are the challenges facing the industry and what can it offer the UK broiler industry. And I did all this while having the busiest year of my life to date. A lot of people in the room have probably told potential scholars there's never a perfect time to apply for your Nuffield, so just get on and apply for it now. What I would say to any new scholars in the room is you can limit the stress you put yourself under by not also getting engaged, buying a house, picking up 2 Cocker Spaniels, and then to top it all off 3 weeks ago, getting married. There's a certain amount of... it's all been great, but it has been quite a busy 2 years. So what did I learn about insect protein? The first thing I need to understand is it scalable? And there's a few things to look at here. Does the industry understand how big it's going to have to get to actually have a meaningful impact? So these containers, these are in Finland. A lot of the industry is going down the modular container route. Each one of these containers, they proudly told me, produces 1.5 tonnes of larvae a month, which sounds fairly impressive, except that 1.5 tonnes dries down to 500 kilos. So to replace just 10% of the 1.2 million tonnes of soya used in the poultry industry in the UK, you would need 20,000 of these units just to take out 10%. And growth is needed across the industry. Now, this is both in breeding, egg production, grow out, and processing. When it scales, could the broiler industry produce a template model for how the industry will look? And I think, yes, it can, where you have a certain number of parent and grandparent farms, hatcheries, grow out, and then processing. And an interesting company I met in South Africa have developed a way to produce insects and then effectively suspend their growth for up to 6 days while they can be transited to the farms where they can then be grown out, because it's a hard part of getting the insects to where they need to be. That is a big problem facing the industry as it grows. And now, how much space would be required for when it does scale? As I mentioned, 20,000 shipping containers is 10% of the UK soya usage for broilers. Now, this is something I saw in Finland. It's called a bioreactor. Now, what it is effectively is a large rotating drum, but it utilizes the full space within it versus tray systems, which a lot of the industry has gone down. Now, in trays, there's a lot of dead space between them, and you can't fill them full because the insects have to be able to move and breathe. But this company argues that per cubic meter of bioreactor is equal to 5 cubic meters of conventional tray-based systems. So that can scale down how much space is actually needed when it does grow. And then another very big important question is there enough feedstock available to grow all these insects? The industry feel like there's just these waste streams sat there completely untapped with no home. Well, I think we all know it's not the case. And it's getting worse. There's some very large biogas production potentially coming on stream in the next 5 years on the UK mainland, and they need hundreds of thousands of tons of these feedstocks to work. So if it scales, will there actually be enough waste streams available for them? Now, regulations. This is another very large barrier, and it's the single largest barrier to the industry, particularly in the UK. Now, why is that? Well, insects are effectively classified as commercial livestock. So what does that mean? Well, it means that you can't feed them anything you can't feed to conventional livestock. This has led to some very strange processes where people are feeding insects layer feed to then feed the insects back to layer birds. That's not a solution. It might produce a technically soya-free egg, but it's not really fixing a problem. It also dictates how they can be fed. In the UK, they can only be fed alive, because if you dry them out, that becomes processed animal protein, and then you've got the BSE legislation, basically means you can't feed them. And to top it all off, the UK has been very slow to deregulate. Now, the EU changed their position a couple of years ago to allow the feeding of processed animal protein, particularly from insects, and they allowed some further waste streams we can't use in their production. But this didn't go far enough. The industry has not exploded in Europe. It's not now replacing soya in broiler rations. But this is where the UK has a golden opportunity. They can deregulate further and make it a viable industry. I was a part of a trial for FERA that was funded by the Food Standards Agency, looking into different waste streams going into insect production. These included restaurant waste, supermarket waste, food processing waste, and broiler manures supplied from our farms. Now, if the UK goes down this stream of allowing these, there is genuine potential that it can work. So it could be a golden opportunity, but at the moment, there's nothing much we can do. Another big question, is it cost effective? Well, there's a few things to look at here as well. One of the big questions in the industry is automation versus labour. This was a farm I visited in Kenya. Each one of these trays was filled by hand, moved by hand, stacked by hand, emptied by hand. Works in Kenya, where labour costs are quite a bit lower than they are in the UK. You'd assume in Europe, therefore, people would be going down robotics. But again, a lot of them aren't. The problem with robotics is when they break down, they're really hard to fix. Your local fitter can't just turn up with his spanners and get it going again. You need specialist knowledge that could be days away from coming to your farm. So even in Europe, a lot of people have gone down the manual labour tray-based route. But what I did meet was one interesting company in the Netherlands who've they've formed a halfway house where it's adapted mushroom farming equipment that then they are growing insects on. So I'll class that as semi-automated, and I think that's a good halfway. Another big cost that I was not really aware of when I started was energy costs. I've sort of assumed you need quite a lot of heat because insects like warm, humid environments. But it turns out when you put a couple of million little insects in a container, they produce an awful lot of heat, and what you actually need is cooling. So I visited a farm 60 miles south of the Arctic Circle in Finland, and they had air conditioning units running 24/7 in their grow-out facilities because it was too warm in there for them. So that is a big factor in production. Another huge one is egg cost. My brother and I had a small-scale facility on our farm back in Yorkshire. We were paying close to £10 a gram for eggs to be delivered, and we were growing them out. We weren't trying to make money. It wasn't a problem. When you start to scale, you need 250 grams of eggs to produce 1 ton of insect larvae. So the cost you pay for your eggs is make or break for the system. A general consensus is you want to be somewhere between 50 pence and £1 per gram for your eggs. And I did visit a farm in Kenya where they've got their on-farm production down to 15 cents per gram. If you can get it down that low, it does start to stack up. And then finally, when you're looking at costs is, can you get a gate fee for the substrate? So substrate is what you feed your insects on. A lot of the UK industry is going down the brewer's grains route because they think, well, it's relatively low cost, £60 a tonne, it won't be that bad. But again, when you start to scale, you need hundreds, if not thousands of tonnes a week. That £60 a tonne is not viable. And what you actually need is to ideally be getting a gate fee for taking the waste rather than paying for it, because when you scale, it just gets out of hand. So, on to insect protein versus conventional soya in our diets, and does it stack up? Simple answer is no, it doesn't. In Africa, I visited a large producer there. They were building a 10-ton-a-day facility. They had a guaranteed contract price of $1,000 per ton for their insect meal. We can have soy delivered to our mill in Yorkshire for close to £300 a ton now. Although it's not a one-for-one replacement in terms of protein content, it just does not make sense financially. Even in Europe, between 1,500 and 3,000 euros a ton is what you'll be paying for insect protein. Oh, sorry, I've gone back. Sorry. But with increased pressure from supermarkets to reduce soy usage and find alternative proteins, although it does not currently stack up, with advances in productivity and economy of scales, it may yet hit a point where it does. So, does the idea have legs? Contrary to what I've just said, I'm going to tell you that yes, it does, and I'll highlight it with a farm I visited in Kenya that I think shows this perfectly. So this is Tim Hobbs. He grows black soldier flies on his farm. He's currently producing about 150 kilos a day and is in the process of scaling to 1 ton of larvae per day. He feeds those larvae to his pigs on his farm. This supplementary feeds them on top of their conventional feed. He uses the pigs to increase the fertility of his soil. Once that's done, he puts up grow houses on his improved land. And then from there, he grows cut flowers for export to Europe and Asia. This one visit alone proves to me that yes, the idea does have legs. If you're fully deregulated and can actually crack on with it, it makes really good sense. So, what next? Well, monitor for regulatory change. I was told first to expect it by the end of 2023, then by the end of 2024. Now I'm being told maybe next year, who knows? So we need to keep monitoring to see what is going to change. The next, micro-inclusion rather than truly replacing soya. There's a lot of interesting studies coming out showing that micro-inclusion can have great welfare outcome measures for birds, increased food conversion ratio, daily live weight gain. So that is another potential use for it. And then finally, can insects be used to process poultry manure? I was very, very pleased to see that 2025 scholar Sinead Davies is picking up this mantle for her scholarship. This, I feel, could be a massive solution for lots of the problems facing the UK broiler industry in how we deal with our muck. So I'm very excited to see what she finds out over the next couple of years. And finally, special thanks to the Nuffield Farming Scholarship Trust, the Poultry Meat Group made up of Abby, Jen, Cobb and Hubbard, and my amazing wife and family for their unwavering support who made this all possible. Thank you.